Is Canada in a good spot, or are there storm clouds on the horizon?
Overall, the data paints a pretty optimistic picture. Canada's economy seems remarkably resilient, and they've navigated some serious global challenges with finesse. They've stuck that soft landing we talked about.
They definitely have. But the report does acknowledge some uncertainty ahead, right?
Absolutely. The new U.S. administration and the constantly shifting geopolitical landscape
Yeah.
add a layer of unpredictability. It's a proceed with cautious optimism kind of situation.
Always got to keep an eye on those global currents. But for our listeners, I think the key takeaway is that Canada seems to be playing the long game.
Yeah.
They're making strategic investments, attracting global capital, and positioning themselves for a future driven by tech, clean energy, and a strong social safety net. So, dear listener, that's our deep dive into the Canadian Fall Economic Statement for 2024. It's a complex story, but hopefully we've distilled it down to the most important and interesting bits. What stood out to you the most? What questions are swirling in your brain? Hit us up on social media. We'd love to hear your perspective. And remember, there's always more to learn, so keep diving.
Absolutely. Keep learning and stay curious.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how Canada seems to be bucking global trends.
Yeah, it's like they're in their own little economic bubble, defying gravity while others struggle.
Well, there's no magic formula, but they've made some savvy moves. They've controlled spending, supported key sectors, and focused on long-term growth.
It's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Exactly. They're not just reacting to short-term crises. They're building a foundation for sustainable prosperity. Think of it like building a house. You need a strong foundation to withstand storms.
Makes sense. And they're not just focused on bricks and mortar, they're also investing in their people with all those social programs we talked about.
Yes, that's a key theme throughout the report. They're heavily investing in things like childcare, dental care, and prescription medications. These are things that directly improve people's lives and create a more inclusive economy.
It's like they're saying, hey, economic growth is great, but it has to benefit everyone, not just the wealthy few.
Exactly. And it's not just about fairness. It's also about economic efficiency. When people have access to affordable childcare and health care, they're more likely to participate in the workforce and contribute to economic growth.
It's a win-win. And it all ties back to that idea of long-term thinking. By investing in people, they're investing in the future of their economy.
Precisely. It's a refreshing contrast to the short-sightedness we often see in economic policy. They're thinking about the next generation, not just the next quarter.
Okay, so we've established that Canada's got a lot going for it. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Are there any potential downsides or risks that we haven't considered?
Well, no economy is without its vulnerabilities, and Canada is no exception. One potential risk is their close economic ties with the United States. Their economies are deeply intertwined, which means they're also exposed to any shocks or downturns in the U.S. economy.
That's a good point. What if the U.S. goes into a recession? Would Canada be dragged down too?
It's certainly a possibility. They're heavily reliant on trade with the U.S., so a slowdown there would definitely impact their exports and economic growth.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. The close relationship benefits them in many ways, but it also makes them vulnerable.
Exactly. And there's also the issue of rising geopolitical tensions. We've seen a lot of uncertainty and instability in recent years, and that could have ripple effects on the global economy, including Canada's.
Yeah, no one's immune to those global headwinds. But Canada seems to be taking steps to mitigate those risks. We talked about their efforts to diversify their trade relationships and strengthen supply chains.
Right. And their focus on innovation and clean energy also helps to position them for a future that's less reliant on fossil fuels and more resilient to global shocks.
So they're hedging their bets, so to speak.
That's a good way to put it. They're diversifying their portfolio both economically and strategically.
Speaking of diversification, let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the Canadian dollar. You mentioned earlier that it's become a more important reserve currency. What's driving that trend?
Several factors are at play. First, Canada has a reputation for strong economic fundamentals. They've got a stable government, a well-regulated financial system, and a history of fiscal responsibility.
Sounds like a pretty solid track record.
It is. And those are all qualities that make their currency attractive to foreign investors. It's seen as a safe haven in a turbulent world.
So when the global economy gets rocky, investors flock to the Canadian dollar for stability.
Exactly. It's like a safe harbor during a storm. And their focus on innovation and clean energy also makes them appealing to investors. We're looking for long-term growth opportunities.
Makes sense. And their decision to pause immigration might also be contributing to the Canadian dollar's strength. I saw some analysis that suggests it could lead to faster GDP per capita growth. which is a key indicator of economic health.
That's a fascinating point.
Uh,
It's counterintuitive, but slowing population growth can actually boost economic output per person, at least in the short term. Think of it like decluttering your house.
You get rid of some things, but it creates more space and makes what you have left more valuable.
I love that analogy. It perfectly captures the concept. By taking a strategic pause on immigration, they're giving the economy a chance to breathe and recalibrate.
And it seems to be working. The report highlights the fact that they're attracting record levels of foreign direct investment, particularly in key sectors like clean energy and technology.
It's a virtuous cycle. Investors see the potential of the Canadian economy. They pour in capital, which fuels further growth and innovation.
It's like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering momentum as it goes. But let's not get too carried away with the excitement. There are still challenges ahead, right?
Of course, no economy is without its problems. Housing affordability remains a major issue, especially in major cities. And the geopolitical landscape is always in flux, creating uncertainty and potential risks.
Yeah, it's a constant balancing act. But overall, the Canadian Fall Economic Statement paints a surprisingly positive picture. They've weathered the storm, they're making strategic investments, and they seem to be positioning themselves for a bright future. This almost makes me want to move to Canada.
Well, I can't blame you. It's certainly an attractive destination both economically and in terms of quality of life. But before we all pack our bags and head north, let's dig a little deeper into some of the specific initiatives outlined in the report. We talked about the $10 a day childcare program, but there's also a lot of talk about investing in innovation and clean energy. Can you give us some more details on those areas?
Absolutely. Let's start with innovation. The government has set a goal of securing Canada's AI advantage. They see artificial intelligence as a key driver of future economic growth, and they're investing heavily to build a world-class AI ecosystem in Canada. They're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Exactly. The report mentions nearly $5 billion invested in AI-related initiatives, including funding for research, talent development, and infrastructure. They're also providing tax incentives to encourage businesses to invest in AI.
Smart move. AI is going to impact pretty much every industry, so it makes sense to be at the forefront of that wave. But AI is just one piece of the puzzle, right?
That's right. They're not just focusing on AI in isolation. They're also investing in other areas of innovation, like quantum computing, biotechnology, and clean technology. They're casting a wide net, hoping to catch the next big breakthrough.
It's like they're creating a fertile ground for innovation to flourish.
That's a great way to put it. They're creating an environment that fosters creativity and entrepreneurship, which is essential for long-term economic growth.
And speaking of clean technology, let's shift gears again and talk about clean energy. The report is full of ambitious plans to transition to a low-carbon economy. What are some of the key initiatives they're pursuing?
Well, there's a lot happening in this space. They're investing in renewable energy sources like wind and solar power. They're developing carbon capture and storage technologies to reduce emissions from heavy industries. And they're promoting energy efficiency to reduce overall energy consumption. It's a multi-pronged approach targeting different sectors and different sources of emissions.
Yeah.
They're not just trying to reduce their own carbon footprint. They're aiming to become a global leader in clean energy technologies.
So they're hoping to export their know-how and expertise to the rest of the world.
Precisely. They see clean energy as a major economic opportunity, and they're determined to seize it.
Smart move. Clean energy is a rapidly growing industry, and there's a huge demand for innovative solutions. But all this investment and ambition will require a lot of capital, right? Where's all the money coming from?
That's a great question. The government is providing significant funding, of course, but they're also relying heavily on private investment.
So they're looking to leverage their own spending to attract even more capital from the private sector.
Exactly. And it seems to be working. As we mentioned earlier, Canada is attracting record levels of foreign direct investment, particularly in key sectors like clean energy and technology. It's a win-win situation.
The government gets to pursue its ambitious agenda, and private investors get to reap the rewards of a growing economy.
And it's not just about financial returns. Many investors are also motivated by the opportunity to make a positive impact on the world.
That's true. ESG investing, that's investing based on environmental, social, and governance factors, is becoming increasingly popular.
And Canada is well positioned to attract those investors. Their commitment to clean energy and social programs aligns perfectly with ESG principles.
So they're not just building a strong economy, they're building a more sustainable and equitable society. It's a compelling narrative for investors.
It is. and it seems to be resonating.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Hmm.
From macroeconomic trends to specific policy initiatives, the Canadian Fall Economic Statement is a comprehensive document. But if we had to boil it down to a few key takeaways, what would they be?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that Canada is in a remarkably strong economic position. They've weathered the global storms, they're making strategic investments,
Yeah.
and they seem to be on a path to sustainable prosperity.
Yeah, they're kind of like the envy of the developed world right now. But it's not just about luck. They made some smart choices and they're reaping the rewards.
Exactly. And another key takeaway is their focus on long-term thinking. They're not just chasing short-term gains, they're building a foundation for a future that's more innovative, more sustainable, and more equitable.
It's a vision that many countries could learn from.
I agree. They're setting a positive example for the rest of the world. But it's important to remember that no plan is foolproof.
Yeah, let's address the elephant in the room. The report is full of positive data and ambitious plans. But are they being realistic? Could things go south?
Well, of course, there are always risks. Um, the global economy is unpredictable, and unforeseen events could derail even the best laid plans. But I think Canada is well prepared to face whatever challenges come their way.
They've got a strong track record of fiscal responsibility, they're attracting global investment, and they've got a clear vision for the future. Those are all good signs.
And they're not afraid to adapt and adjust their course as needed. We saw that with their decision to pause immigration.
So it's a cautious optimism, but an optimism nonetheless.
Yes, exactly. Canada is a country to watch, and I think they're on the right track. But it's important to remember that economic data is just a snapshot in time. It can tell us where we are and where we've been, but it can't predict the future with certainty.
That's a good point. We need to look beyond the numbers and consider the broader context, the global trends, the political landscape. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly, and sometimes those missing pieces can have a big impact on the final picture. But even with those uncertainties, I think Canada is well positioned to navigate the challenges ahead. They've got a strong foundation, a clear vision, and a willingness to adapt. Those are all qualities that will help them thrive in a rapidly changing world.
So we've spent a good chunk of time looking at Canada's economic picture from a pretty high level, those big trends and policies. But let's bring it down to earth for a sec.
Okay.
How does all this actually affect the lives of everyday Canadians?
Right, because GDP growth and foreign investment are great and all, but they don't mean much if people aren't actually feeling the benefits in their daily lives.
Exactly. It's got to trickle down, right? So what's the outlook for the average Canadian,
Yeah.
the worker, the family, a small business owner?
Well, the report paints a cautiously optimistic picture.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, real wages are up, job creation is strong, and inflation seems to be under control. Those are all good signs for working families.
Yeah, for sure. And those social programs we discussed earlier, the child care, dental care, prescription meds, those are real game changers when it comes to affordability and just overall quality of life.
Absolutely. Those programs directly address those cost of living pressures so many Canadians are facing.
Hmm.
Putting more money back in their pockets and reducing some of that financial stress. And that has ripple effects throughout the whole economy.
It's like taking a deep breath, finally some relief.
Exactly.
And when people have more money to spend, it boosts the economy, right? Creates more jobs, leads to even more growth.
It's a positive feedback loop.
Now, what about businesses? Is it all smooth sailing for entrepreneurs and small business owners?
Well, I mean, no economy is perfect, right? There are always challenges. But the report highlights some positive trends for businesses. Low interest rates, strong investment, and a growing focus on innovation.
So those are all good signs.
Yeah, and the government is really trying to create a better environment for businesses to thrive. They're cutting red tape, streamlining regulations, offering tax incentives, and encouraging investment and growth. They get it. They know small businesses are the backbone of the economy.
And it sounds like their efforts are working. The report mentions that small business confidence is getting close to those historical averages.
Which is a great sign. It means entrepreneurs are feeling good about the future. They're willing to take risks, and that's what drives a dynamic economy.
Right. Plus, there's that whole Canada's the new cool kid thing we talked about. With the Canadian dollar becoming a major reserve currency, that's got to be good for business, right?
It definitely helps.
Mhm.
A stronger currency makes Canadian products and services more competitive globally, and it attracts foreign investment, which again creates jobs and fuels growth.
So overall, it sounds like a pretty bright future for Canada, both economically and socially. They've got a solid plan, they're making it happen, and they seem to really care about creating a more prosperous and equitable society.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Of course, there are always uncertainties, but Canada seems to be handling things well, navigating those choppy waters of the global economy with skill and determination.
Definitely. But we always have to remember, economic progress, it's not just about the numbers.
It's about people.
It's about creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, to live a good life, to contribute. And that's what makes Canada's story so interesting.
Absolutely. It's about balancing economic growth with social progress, embracing innovation, but also protecting the environment, building a future that's both prosperous and sustainable.
And that, dear listener, that's what we hope you take away from this deep dive. We've explored Canada's fall economic statement together, but now we want to hear from you. What stood out to you? What questions came up as we talked?
Remember, economic data, it's just a snapshot. It's one piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
So what other pieces might you need to get a fuller picture of Canada's future?
Head over to social media and share your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going. The best deep dives don't end when the episode is over. They make you think, they spark curiosity. And maybe they even send you off on your own deep dive.
So keep exploring, stay curious.
And until next time, happy diving.